My name is Emily, and at 31, I thought I had my life figured out. 2 years ago, when I landed a big promotion at work, everything seemed to fall into place. My salary was finally enough to breathe a little easier, pay my mortgage, live comfortably, and even help others. That's when I made the decision to start supporting my parents financially. "Emily, sweetheart, you don't have to do this," Mom had said when I first mentioned setting up the monthly transfers. "Mom, I want to. I'm doing well, and I'd love to help," I replied, already pulling out my phone to schedule the automatic $1,500 deposit into their account. Dad's eyes shone with what I thought was gratitude. "We raised a good one, Linda," he said to my mom, pulling her close. "Those first few months felt amazing. Every time the money hit their account, they'd call to thank me. Mom would gush about how lucky they were to have such a thoughtful daughter, and Dad would crack jokes about having a sugar daughter instead of being a sugar daddy. We'd laugh, and I'd feel good about giving back to the people who had raised me. But you know what they say, no good deed goes unpunished. It started gradually. The thank you calls became less frequent and then stopped altogether. At first, I didn't think much of it. Life gets busy, right? But then the requests started. "Emily, honey," Mom called one day, her voice warm. "Our coffee maker broke down. You wouldn't believe the noise it made. Could you help us get a new one?" "Of course," I said without hesitation. It was just a coffee maker after all. Then came the iron, the microwave, the washing machine. Each request was bigger than the last, each story behind it more elaborate. I still remember the day I finally spoke up. I had just wrapped up a brutal week at work when Mom called, asking about getting a new smart TV. "Mom," I sighed, trying to keep my voice gentle, "I need you to understand something. I work hard for my money, and while I love helping you guys, I think we need to slow down on the purchases." Silence. "The first C," Mom finally said, her voice suddenly cold. "Well, I wouldn't want to be a burden." The call ended abruptly, leaving me with a sick feeling in my stomach. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced with my family. Weeks passed without a single call or message. Our usual Sunday dinner stopped. Invitations I sent went unanswered. Thank God for my brother Matt. At 28, he had recently gotten married to his longtime girlfriend Jenna in a beautiful ceremony that ironically I had helped pay for. During those months of silence, he became my only source of insight into our parents' world. "You won't believe this," Matt said one day over the phone, barely containing his laughter. "Mom and Dad are acting like you committed a crime. They keep going on about how you abandoned them over a TV. I let out a disbelieving laugh. "A TV? You'd think I refused to donate a kidney, right? But you know how they are. Remember when I didn't call for a few days during my honeymoon?" Mom nearly had a meltdown. As Thanksgiving approached, I decided enough was enough. I wasn't about to let a misunderstanding or whatever this had turned into tear my family apart. So, armed with Dad's favorite homemade apple pie and a few carefully chosen gifts, I showed up at their doorstep unannounced. When Mom opened the door, I saw the conflict in her eyes, the lingering resentment battling against her instinct to welcome her daughter home. Dad appeared behind her, his expression unreadable. After a moment's hesitation, they let me in. Matt and Jenna were already there, sitting stiffly in the living room. The atmosphere was tense at first, but as the evening progressed, warmth started seeping back in. Over turkey and stuffing, the conversation flowed more easily than I expected. It almost felt like old times. Then Dad cleared his throat. "We've been thinking," he said, glancing around the table. "What if we all took a trip to Europe early next year? Germany, specifically. We've been planning it with Matt and Jenna. Emily, you should come too." Mom's eyes lit up. "Oh, yes! We've already been looking at deals. It would be so wonderful to have the whole family together." I hesitated. A family trip to Europe? Despite our recent issues, the thought was tempting. After a few moments of mental calendar checking, I nodded. "You know what? That sounds great. I could use a vacation." The rest of the evening was spent discussing potential destinations. For the first time in months, it felt like we were a family again. That night, as I drove home, I felt optimistic. Maybe this trip was exactly what we needed to rebuild our bond. The next morning, I requested 2 weeks off for February, already looking forward to exploring German cities with my family. Over the following weeks, I I started rejoining the Sunday dinners. Each time, we spent hours planning our upcoming adventure. December arrived, bringing with it a blanket of snow and the warmth of holiday cheer. I threw myself into Christmas shopping, determined to make this year special after our rocky patch. For Mom, I picked out a luxurious cashmere sweater she'd been eyeing. Dad got the latest model of his favorite smartwatch. For Matt and Jenna, a high-end espresso machine for their new house. On Christmas Eve, I took a cab to my parents' house, my arms filled with carefully wrapped gifts. Their home was decorated festively, lights twinkling against the windows. Jenna's car was already in the driveway. "Merry Christmas!" Mom greeted me with a warm hug that almost felt like old times. The living room smelled of cinnamon and pine, and the tree sparkled with ornaments we'd collected over the years. The gift exchange started off well. My presents were met with excitement and gratitude. But then, as dinner progressed, I noticed Mom and Dad exchanging looks, Jenna suddenly fascinated by her plate, and Matt unusually quiet. Something was up. Then Mom, in her syrupy, sweet voice, spoke. "So, Emily, about the Europe trip." I smiled. "Yeah, I'm so excited. Did you guys finalize the itinerary?" "Well," she said, reaching for Dad's hand, "we actually found this amazing package deal for all 5 of us." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "What would really make sense," she continued, still sweet as honey, "is if you covered the trip expenses for everyone." The air in the room seemed to freeze. I set my fork down, my pulse quickening. "I'm sorry. What?" Dad cleared his throat. "Well, honey, you make the most money out of all of us." We figured it just made sense. I looked at Matt, expecting him to back me up. Instead, he gave me a small shrug. "We did talk about it," he mumbled. "And, well, you can afford it?" I stared at my family, realizing with a sinking feeling that this wasn't a request. It was an expectation. I stared at my family, my stomach twisting into a knot. "You want me to pay for the entire trip?" I repeated, making sure I hadn't misheard. Mom nodded, smiling like she had just asked me to pass the salt. "It just makes the most sense, sweetheart. You're doing so well at work. We thought this could be your way of giving back to the family." "Giving back?" I glanced at Matt, expecting some kind of support, but he just shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Jenna wouldn't even look at me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I already agreed to go on this trip. I'm happy to pay for my own ticket. But covering everything for 5 people? That's a lot of money, Mom." Dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You make more than enough. You wouldn't even feel it." That stung. "You don't know that," I said sharply. "You have no idea what my expenses are. My mortgage, my bills." Mom waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, please. You live alone. What could you possibly be spending so much on?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The same parents who used to tell me how proud they were of my hard work were now acting like my success made me their personal ATM. "I'm not paying for the trip," I said firmly. The room went silent. Mom's smile vanished. "So you're just going to let your family miss out on this experience? You're going to be selfish?" There it was, that word again. Selfish. The same word she used when I pushed back on their endless requests for money, when I stopped buying them every little thing they wanted, when I dared to set boundaries. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. "You think I'm selfish? After everything I've done for you? The monthly transfers? The wedding I helped pay for? All the appliances, the dinners, the gifts, none of that mattered?" Mom crossed her arms. "That was different. This is about family. This is about being there for each other." Being there for each other? I looked around the table, suddenly feeling like an outsider in my own family. Had it always been like this and I just hadn't noticed? Dad sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the one being difficult. "If you won't help your family, maybe it's better if you go." My heart dropped. I turned to Matt one last time, praying he'd say something. But he just sat there, eyes glued to the table. I pushed my chair back and stood. "Merry Christmas," the first said, my voice hollow. No one responded as I grabbed my coat and walked out. That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. I kept hoping I'd missed something, that maybe I was overreacting. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They didn't appreciate me. They appreciated my money. And when I finally said no, they threw me away like I was nothing. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. You're proving exactly what we thought. You only care about yourself. Don't bother reaching out to us again if this is the kind of daughter you've become." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Then I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic transfers, blocked her number, and cried myself to sleep. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. No calls, no messages. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly checking my phone, waiting for their next demand. And yet, the silence hurt more than I expected. Matt finally reached out in mid-January. "Hey," he said awkwardly when I picked up. "Can we talk?" I sighed. "What is it, Matt?" A pause. Then, "Look, I know Christmas was a mess, but Mom and Dad are really upset. Maybe if you just apologized." I nearly dropped the phone. "Apologized? For how you handled things," he added quickly. "You know how Mom is. She's stubborn, but if you just..." I cut him off. "Matt, I didn't do anything wrong." He let out a frustrated sigh. "It's just a trip, Emily. It's not like they were asking you to pay off their mortgage." I laughed bitterly. "Not yet, anyway." He went quiet. I exhaled, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Matt, do you hear yourself? They tried to manipulate me. They made me feel guilty for not paying for a vacation I wasn't even the one who planned." "Yeah, but..." "No. No but. If you want to let them control you, that's your choice. But I'm done." Another long silence. Then, softly, "So that's it?" I swallowed hard. "I guess it is." February rolled around, and while my family was sightseeing in Germany, I was boarding a plane to Hawaii. If I was going to spend money, it was going to be on myself. The moment I stepped onto the beach, warm sand between my toes and the sound of waves crashing in the distance, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. I spent 2 weeks living on my own terms. Surfing, hiking, meeting new people. No guilt, no obligations. One evening, as I sat on my hotel balcony watching the sunset, my phone buzzed. Matt again. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened, his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Emily, things aren't good back home. Call me when you get this." I frowned. But I didn't call back. Not yet. I ignored Matt's voicemail for 2 days, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't ready. For the first time in years, I had no obligations, no one guilting me into doing things I didn't want to do. And I wasn't about to let whatever family drama was brewing ruin the last days of my vacation. So I left my phone in my hotel room and spent my time soaking up the Hawaiian sun, drinking cocktails by the pool, and pretending I had no past. But reality has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. On my last night, I finally caved and called Matt back. He picked up immediately. "Jesus, Emily, I thought you blocked me too." "I didn't," I sighed, rubbing my temple. "I just needed time." "What's going on?" He hesitated. "Mom and Dad are in trouble." Of course they were. I didn't say anything, waiting for him to continue. Matt exhaled heavily. "It's Amy and Jake. They screwed them over." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" They borrowed money. A lot of it." I closed my eyes. "How much?" 50,000. My stomach dropped. "Are you serious?" "Yeah," he muttered. "Turns out Jake has a gambling problem. Mom and Dad gave them their credit card to use for emergencies on the trip. Next thing they knew, the card was maxed out, and Amy and Jake were thousands in debt to the casino." I pressed my fingers against my forehead. Why would they give them access to that much money? Matt let out a humorless laugh. "Because they trust Amy. She's always been the favorite, remember? I did. Growing up, Amy could do no wrong. She was the golden child, the one Mom and Dad bragged about at family gatherings. And now, she had drained them dry without a second thought. So what do they want from me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "They need help," I scoffed. "They mean they need money." "Emily, this is serious. They could lose the house." I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. "That's not my problem, Matt. They made their choices. They called me selfish for setting boundaries, cut me off when I wouldn't fund their vacation. And now that their favorite child screwed them over, suddenly I'm supposed to swoop in and save them?" "You don't have to sound so heartless," he snapped. "I'm not heartless," I shot back. "I just learned my lesson." Silence. Then, softer, "They're our parents, Emily." "They were my parents when they kicked me out on Christmas," the first said. voice steady. And they didn't seem to care then. When I landed back home the next day, my phone was flooded with missed calls. Mom, Dad, Amy, even Jenna. The first didn't listen to any of the voicemails. I didn't need to. Instead, I called my bank and triple-checked that all my automatic payments to them had been canceled. Then, just to be safe, I put a fraud alert on my accounts. I knew my parents wouldn't steal from me, but I also knew desperation makes people do crazy things. That night, Matt showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't answer, but despite everything, he was still my brother. He stood in the hallway, looking exhausted. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked in, rubbing his face. "They're really bad, Em. Mom's been crying for days. Dad barely speaks." I crossed my arms. "What do you want me to do about it?" He stared at me. "They need help." I raised an eyebrow. "Financial help?" His silence was answer enough. I sighed, shaking my head. "Matt, they got themselves into this. They enabled Amy for years, let her do whatever she wanted, and now they're paying the price. If I bail them out, what lesson do they learn?" His jaw tightened. "So you're just going to let them suffer?" "I'm going to let them deal with the consequences of their choices," I corrected. He looked away. "You're colder than I thought." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "No, Matt. I'm just done being taken advantage of." For weeks, the messages kept coming. Mom alternating between guilt trips and anger. Dad sending short, clipped texts, like talking to me physically pained him. Amy? She was full of promises. "Jake is getting help. We're going to change. Just this one time, please." I blocked her. Then, one night, there was a knock at my door. It was Mom. She looked different, tired, older, like life had chewed her up and spit her out. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside. She sat on my couch, wringing her hands. "We're losing the house." I said nothing. She exhaled shakily. "We had to sell Dad's car." Took out a second mortgage. "It's still not enough." I leaned against the wall. "And what do you want from me?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "You know what we want." I clenched my jaw. "I can't help you." Her head snapped up. "Can't or won't?" I took a slow breath. "Both." She let out a choked laugh. "You'd really let your parents become homeless?" I narrowed my eyes. "You're not homeless. You're just not living in luxury anymore." Mom sniffed, wiping her eyes. "I don't even recognize you anymore." I crossed my arms. "That makes two of us." She stood, smoothing out her coat. "This is the last time I'll ask, Emily. Please help your family." I met her gaze. "No." Her face hardened. "Then don't ever come back." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. "Understood." And just like that, she walked out of my life. Weeks passed, then months. The messages slowed, then stopped. I heard through relatives that my parents moved to a smaller house, that Dad had picked up a part-time job, that Amy and Jake filed for bankruptcy. They were struggling, but they were surviving. And I was, okay, better even. I had started a new hobby, pottery, joined a book club, went on dates. For the first time in years, my life felt like it was mine. Then, one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. From Mom. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short, handwritten note. "We were wrong. We lost sight of what really mattered, and we lost you. I hope one day you can forgive us." I sat there for a long time, rereading the words. I wasn't sure how to feel. Was it genuine, or just another attempt to pull me back in? I didn't know. And for the first time, I realized I didn't have to decide right away. For once, I was in control. And that felt good. I held the letter for a long time. Mom's handwriting was familiar, neat, deliberate. The words, though few, were heavier than I expected. "We were wrong. We lost sight of what really mattered, and we lost you. I hope one day you can forgive us." I read it over and over, searching for hidden meaning, for manipulation disguised as regret. But I couldn't find any demands, any guilt tripping, any expectation that I fix their problems. It was just an apology. I wasn't sure what to do with that. For months, I had been so sure of my decision. I had walked away, set boundaries, and refused to be the family's personal bank. I had made peace with my choice, or so I thought. But something about seeing those words in black ink made my chest tighten. I placed the letter in a drawer, unsure if I wanted to keep it or throw it away. Then, I moved on with my day. For the next week, I thought about the letter more than I wanted to admit. I didn't tell anyone about it, not even my best friend, Laura. She had been my biggest cheerleader through everything, always reminding me that I deserved better. Instead, I carried it with me in the back of my mind, letting it swirl around like a song. I couldn't get out of my head. I wondered what Mom expected. Did she want me to call? To forgive her? To pretend nothing had happened? The old me would have rushed to fix things. The new me? I wasn't sure. One evening, Matt called. I hesitated before answering. We hadn't talked in weeks. "Hey," he said, voice cautious. "Hey," a pause. "Then, did you get Mom's letter?" So that's why he was calling. "I did," I admitted. "Are you going to respond?" I sighed, rubbing my temple. "I don't know, Matt. She means it, you know." I let out a short laugh. "Yeah? And how do you know that?" "Because she's different," he said, sounding tired. "Dad, too. They've been through a lot. They had to start over completely. It humbled them." I leaned back on my couch. "And Amy?" His silence was telling. "Still blaming everyone but herself?" I guessed. "Pretty much," he muttered. "She and Jake are still struggling. They don't talk to Mom and Dad much anymore." I wasn't surprised. Amy had always been the kind of person who only stuck around when things were easy. "Look," Matt continued, "I'm not saying you have to forgive them today, or ever, but they're not the same people they were last year." I swallowed, staring at the ceiling. "I'll think about it." "That's all I'm asking," he said softly. "I didn't call. I wasn't ready, but I didn't throw the letter away either." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the power to decide, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because it was my choice. And that was enough for now. Months passed. Life moved forward. I got promoted again, bought myself a new car, took another solo trip, this time to Italy. I was happy, truly happy. But every so often, I'd think about my parents. I'd wonder what they were doing, if they still thought about me, if Mom regretted everything. Then one afternoon, I got another letter. It was from Dad. That surprised me. I opened it cautiously, not sure what to expect. "Emily, I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I won't ask for it. But I do want you to know that I am sorry. I was blinded by pride and expectation. I let you down. We both did. Mom and I are doing okay now, but we miss you. No strings attached, just know that." I let out a slow breath, my heart aching in a way I hadn't expected. No strings attached. That was new. That night, I sat with the letter in my hands, reading it over and over. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe things could be different. One Sunday morning, I found myself driving through my childhood neighborhood. I hadn't meant to. I was just driving, but somehow I ended up on their street. Their house was smaller than I remembered. The yard wasn't as pristine as it used to be. I pulled over and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. Was I really ready for this? Did I even want this? I almost turned around. But then, the front door opened. Mom stepped out, carrying a bag of groceries. She looked thinner, more tired, but when her eyes met mine, they widened in shock. She stood frozen, like she wasn't sure if I was real. Neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she placed the bag down and took a tentative step forward. I rolled down my window. "Hi, Mom." Her hand flew to her mouth, and for a second, I thought she might cry. Then, in a shaky voice, she whispered, "Hi, sweetheart." I sat there, hands gripping the wheel, unsure of what to do next. Mom stood frozen on the porch, her expression shifting from shock to something unreadable. For a brief moment, I thought about starting the car and driving away. This wasn't planned. I wasn't ready. But then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "You're here." Something in my chest tightened. I nodded. "Yeah, I guess 1M. She hesitated, then took another step forward. Do you want to come inside?" Everything in me screamed to say no. Walking through that door again meant opening up old wounds, facing everything I had spent the last year trying to heal from. But at the same time, I had driven here for a reason. I swallowed hard. "Okay." Mom's breath hitched, like she hadn't actually expected me to agree. She quickly wiped her hands on her jeans, then turned to open the door. I followed her inside, my heart pounding. The house smelled the same, like vanilla and something vaguely floral, but it felt different, smaller, quieter. Gone were the expensive decorations, the fancy rugs, the oversized furniture that once made the place feel like a showroom instead of a home. It looked normal now, lived in. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper. When he looked up and saw me, his whole body stiffened. For a second, none of us spoke. Then he slowly set the paper down. Emily. I nodded. Hey, Dad. His eyes flickered to Mom, then back to me. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. The confident, sharp-edged man who once told me to leave if I wouldn't contribute to the family now seemed unsure of himself. I took a seat across from him. Mom hovered near the doorway, like she didn't want to intrude. Dad cleared his throat. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again. Me neither, I admitted. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I got your letter. I raised an eyebrow. My letter? He nodded. The one you sent with all the information about financial advisors and gambling support groups. Oh, that letter. The one I had sent months ago, before deciding to cut them off completely. I had assumed they had ignored it, like they ignored everything else that didn't involve me giving them money. Dad let out a small chuckle. You always were the smartest one in the family. I blinked. That wasn't something he had ever said before. Mom finally sat down, wringing her hands. We were a mess after everything happened. Losing the house, having to start over it was humbling. She swallowed hard. I don't expect you to forgive us, sweetheart, but I need you to know that we see it now. How unfair we were to you. How much we took you for granted. My throat tightened. Dad nodded, his face serious. We were wrong, Emily. We let our pride and expectations get in the way of appreciating you. We assumed because you were doing well, it meant you owed us something. That was selfish. Hearing him say that word selfish hit me harder than I expected, because for so long, that's what they had accused me of being. And now, they were finally admitting it was them all along. We talked for a long time, not just about the past, but about where they were now. Mom had picked up a part-time job at a local bakery. Dad was working as a handyman for a small contracting company. They weren't living the cushy retirement they had planned, but they were surviving. I'm not going to lie, Mom said, stirring her tea. It was hard at first. Losing everything. Realizing we had been enabling Amy for years. Facing the fact that we put ourselves in this position. She let out a breath. But we've learned a lot. About ourselves. About what really matters. I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. They had changed. Not just in words, but in actions. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like they were trying to manipulate me. I still wasn't ready to forgive them completely. But maybe, just maybe, I was ready to try. I didn't stay long that night. When I stood to leave, Mom reached out hesitantly, as if unsure whether she was allowed to hug me. After a moment, I took a step forward and wrapped my arms around her. She let out a small, shaky breath, holding me like she was afraid I'd disappear. Dad gave me a firm nod. Take care of yourself, kid. I smirked. I always do. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter. Not because everything was magically fixed, but because, for the first time, it felt like there was hope. Hope that maybe, someday, we could be a family again. In the following weeks, I took things slow. Mom would text me here and there, nothing too heavy, just little things. A picture of a new recipe she tried. A photo of Dad fixing something around the house. Matt checked in more often, too. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. Amy called. I stared at her name on my screen, debating whether to answer. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to block her number the way I had before. But another part of me, the part that had finally started to heal, was curious. So I picked up. Her voice was quiet. Hey. I leaned against my counter. Hey. She hesitated. I heard you went to see Mom and Dad. I did. A pause. Then, are you talking to them again? I considered my answer. Kind of. I'm taking it one step at a time. Amy let out a shaky breath. That's good. I waited. Then finally, she whispered, I messed up, Em. That was the first real thing she had said to me in years. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt tired. I know, I said softly. She sniffed. I'm trying to fix things, I swear. But it's hard. And I don't know where to start. I exhaled slowly. Then start where I did, by taking responsibility. Amy was quiet for a long time. Then, can we talk? Like, really talk? I closed my eyes. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for, the moment she finally realized the damage she had done. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to hold on to my anger anymore. Yeah, I said. We can talk. And just like that, the door I had slammed shut so long ago cracked open. Not all the way, but just enough to let some light in. Amy and I met for coffee a few days later. It was strange seeing her like this, no fancy clothes, no carefully styled hair, no forced confidence. She looked tired. She stirred her drink absent-mindedly, eyes fixed on the table. I don't even know where to start. I took a sip of my coffee, watching her. Start with the truth. She let out a dry laugh. That's new for me. I didn't disagree. She exhaled slowly. I messed up, Em. I know I did. And I'm not just talking about Germany. I took advantage of Mom and Dad, of you. I let Jake pull me into his mess, and instead of stopping, I made it worse. I studied her face. Are you still with him? She hesitated, then shook her head. No, I left a few months ago. He wasn't just gambling. He was lying, stealing. I kept thinking I could fix him, but I couldn't even fix myself. Something in her voice cracked on that last word, and for the first time in years, I saw my sister, the real one, not the version she pretended to be. I softened slightly. So, what now? She looked down at her hands. I'm in therapy, and I'm going to Gamblers Anonymous. It's hard, but I have to do it. I lost everything, Em. My marriage, my house, my parents. And I don't even blame anyone but myself. I let that sink in. For years, Amy had lived in a bubble where she could do no wrong, where Mom and Dad would always catch her, always clean up her messes. Now, for the first time, she was standing in the wreckage she had created, and she wasn't looking for a way out. She was looking for a way through. I sighed, leaning back. I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were. She nodded. I don't expect that, but maybe. I hesitated. Maybe we can figure out what comes next. Amy blinked rapidly, like she was trying to keep herself together. I'd like that. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Months passed. Slowly, I started rebuilding my relationship with my family, not the way it was before, but something new. Mom and Dad didn't expect money from me anymore. They didn't treat me like a walking bank account. We talked more, but on my terms. When I visited, I never felt obligated. I felt like I was there because I wanted to be. Amy stayed in therapy. She got a job, a small apartment, and was working on paying off her debts. And me? I kept living my life. I threw myself into work, but not in the way I used to, the kind where I burned myself out, thinking I had to prove something to everyone. Now, I worked for me. I traveled. I picked up new hobbies. I started dating again. And somewhere along the way, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was happy. One day, while I was reading in my apartment, my phone buzzed. Mom. I hesitated, then picked up. Hey, Mom. Hi, sweetheart, she said. I was just wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner this Sunday. She sounded different. Lighter. The first smiled. Yeah, I'd like that. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, really. Just small things. Normal things. And for the first time, it felt easy. Like family was supposed to. Looking back, I know I did the right thing. Setting boundaries. Walking away when I needed to. Letting them figure things out on their own. It wasn't easy. It hurt like hell. But it also gave them the chance to change. Not for me, for themselves. And in the end, that's what made all the difference. Story 2, I never imagined that at 45, I would be in this situation, gazing around my large home in the most affluent area of the city. I should have been totally satisfied. I had created everything from the ground up, after all. A gorgeous flat downtown, a successful chain of spas that had become the buzz of town, and this home that most people could only imagine. However, something was lacking. Despite all of my accomplishments, there was a need that no amount of financial success could satisfy. My name is Jenna Mitchell. There was always stillness when I got home each evening. The mansion seemed too large and too silent. Many times, my friends, the majority of them, were contentedly married and had kids, tried to introduce me to people, but nothing ever worked out. You can't continue to work 60 hours a week, Jenna. There is more to life than business meetings and profit margins, according to my closest friend, Sarah. I was aware of her correctness. However, I had been so consumed with growing my spa business that I had lost sight of how to put my personal life first. I was both the proprietor and the esthetician of a tiny salon in a strip mall when it all began. Genuine willpower and innumerable restless nights. I grew to 3, then 5, and now 8 prosperous spas around the city. Every time the subject of my personal life came up, I would argue that I was happy. But was I? In actuality, I had witnessed moms and daughters visiting my spa together, laughing and savoring special moments, and it would hurt me within. I was sitting in my home office one evening going over quarterly reports. It buzzed on my phone. Once more, it was Sarah. "Jen, never again tell me that you're working late." Before I could even say hi, she said, "I'm just completing some papers," I answered, being aware of the direction this discussion was taking. "Stop whatever you're doing then. You're coming to Lisa's place this Saturday for a dinner party. This time, no excuses." Sarah would not listen to my protests. "I would like you to meet someone." She continued in a tone that suggested she was planning something. "Don't tell me this is just another setup, Sarah." I let out a moan. "Jen, believe me on this one. He is unique. He has a teenage daughter, is divorced, and is prosperous. He is genuine, not like the workaholics I've previously presented to you." I paused at something in her voice. Perhaps it was time to risk something. "All right," I sighed. "However, I will no longer allow you to act as a matchmaker." The dinner gathering was just as you may have imagined. Better wine, better food, and the easy banter that old friends have. I saw him at that point. It was not his physical appearance that made David Anderson stand out in the throng, but rather his demeanor. I saw that he exuded a certain calm assurance. Before I knew it, hours had gone by when we relocated to a more peaceful area of the room. David was a corporate attorney who had gone through 3 years of divorce. On alternating weeks, his 15-year-old daughter Emma resided with him and her mother. Having a teenager as a co-parent must be difficult. Sipping my wine, I replied. David laughed. "Emma is a lovely child, but teens can be a pain in the ass. They might be your closest buddy one moment and then roll their eyes at everything you say the next." We found that hiking, old films, and bad dad jokes were things we had in common. When he asked for my number at the end of the night, it seemed effortless and natural. I didn't think twice. We went to a little Italian restaurant downtown for our first date. As at the party, the talk flowed naturally. "Describe Emma to me." "Sincerely interested in his daughter," I said. His expression brightened. "She is really intelligent, actually, into photography and the arts. She is going through the normal adolescent stage of believing she is an expert on everything. Despite everything, she has a kind heart." We began going out on a regular basis. Peaceful dinners at home for the first time in years, movie evenings, and weekend walks. I saw that my thoughts were diverting from my task. After a couple months of dating, the subject of meeting Emma naturally came up. As we strolled across the park one evening, David remarked, "I think she'd like you. She has inquired about you." I experienced a twinge of anxiety. "Jenna, are you certain it's not too soon?" 4 months have passed since we started dating. I believe the moment has come. The next weekend was set aside for the gathering. Emma would arrive first at one of my spas. After that, we would all gather together for supper. I worked for hours to ensure that everything would be flawless. I recognized David in Emma's looks as soon as she entered the spa. The same easy grin, the same kind brown eyes. She first came across as reserved, but she started to open up when I gave her a tour of the spa and introduced her to the staff. Glancing around the treatment area, she remarked, "This is so cool. You're on all 8 of these places now," Dad remarked. I answered, attempting to avoid coming across as boastful. "If I attempted some of the therapies, would that be acceptable?" With hesitation, she asked. I gave her a VIP membership card while grinning. "Think of this as a welcoming present." Her eyes brightened. and I briefly had a glimpse of the youngster hiding behind the adolescent facade. Really? Thank you. Emma was unable to stop chatting about her spa treatment throughout dinner that night. Something changed inside of me as David smiled at me across the table. This might, just might, work. Our bond became stronger as the months went by. Emma appeared to truly enjoy spending time with me, and David and I settled into a comfortable rhythm. She would frequently visit my spa with her friends, and we would engage in lengthy discussions about schoolboys and her future goals. About a year into our romance, David and I were eating supper at my place one evening when he abruptly started acting serious. "Jen," he remarked as he reached for my hand across the table. "It has been an incredible year. You made our lives and mine so much more joyful. I want to be with you for the rest of my life, because I love you. Are you going to wed me?" He produced a modest yet tasteful ring, similar to our partnership. As I nodded, tears filled my eyes. Indeed, definitely. We chose to have a small ceremony at City Hall with only our intimate family members in attendance. Emma's response when we informed her wasn't exactly what I had anticipated. "However, why are we unable to have a large wedding?" she objected. "Being a bridesmaid was my dream. At school, everyone discusses their parents' weddings." I drew her into my embrace. "You have your entire life ahead of you, my dear. You have complete control over the size and beauty of your wedding." David and Emma moved into my home following the wedding. Emma had the greatest room in the house redecorated, and I let her choose out the furniture and paint colors. For a time, everything seemed ideal, and she appeared to be ecstatic with her new area. Together, we took trips, dined at new places, and watched films in comfortable nights. While I worked on the spa company, Emma would frequently visit me in my home office to complete her schoolwork. Though there was one ominous cloud in an otherwise bright sky, it seemed like the family I had always desired. Karen, David's ex-wife. She expressed her disapproval of me right away when we first met. When she arrived to pick up Emma, she would only communicate with Emma or David, never ever speaking to me directly. "Your mom looks quite serious." One day, following a particularly chilly conversation, I stated to Emma. Emma gave a shrug. "She is only defensive. To show her father, she maintains a record of every penny she spends on me. She makes a larger monthly contribution to my supplies. Spreadsheets are in her possession." Although I thought this money preoccupation was odd, I kept my thoughts to myself. I didn't want to create any tension because, after all, Emma's mother was still Karen. The earliest warning indications were mild. When we were shopping, I saw Emma paying more attention to the price tags. She would comment on how much I spent on her compared to how much I spent on myself. I initially dismissed it as normal adolescent conduct, but it soon became more regular and more blatant. I once saw her looking at the labels on my clothes while she went through my wardrobe. "What are you doing, Emma?" She looked remorseful as she leaped. "Looking only. It's a pretty dress." "What was the price?" I remarked softly. "That's not exactly the right question to ask. Are you bothered by something?" She hurried away without responding. I tried talking to David about it later. As we prepared for bed, I said, "Honey, I'm concerned about Emma's obsession with money." David dismissed it with a wave. "She is a teenager. Everybody has stages. It feels different now." "She seems to be keeping score." With a kiss on my forehead, he murmured, "You're overanalyzing it." Everything wasn't fine, but it's all right now. My senior year was when everything reached a breaking point. She strewn college pamphlets on our dining room table one evening. "Look at these programs," she said with enthusiasm. "This one is in California, while this one is in New York." I perused the pamphlets. All elite private universities with exorbitant tuition costs. "Have you thought of any less expensive options?" Emma's face quickly altered when I questioned her gently. "Why should I? You're wealthy. These schools are within your means." David only nodded as I glanced to him for encouragement. "She will undoubtedly assist Emma with her schooling." "Yes, honey." I was astounded by the assumption in their tones. "We must consider every possibility." I spoke aggressively. "Not only the priciest ones. Emma's academic aptitude and our financial constraints must be taken into account." Emma's response was furious. The brochures flew from the table as she brushed them away. "You're simply being avaricious. Despite having a lot of money, you refuse to assist me. Calm down, Emma. I made an effort to reason with her. It's not like money grows on trees. I earned all I have via hard effort. I'm heading to my mother's. She ran upstairs and shouted. After a few minutes, she descended with her packed luggage and hurried to a cab that was waiting. When she was gone, David betrayed me. You treated her too harshly. She is only an adolescent with aspirations. I emphasized that dreams must be practical. And when did it start assuming that I would cover all of the costs? That night, I slept by myself, wondering how things had gone so wrong, while he went to bed furious. Emma remained at her mother's place for several days. All of my calls ended up in voicemail. I heard David's voice especially low and somber one evening as I was passing his home office. Something about his tone caused me to pause, even though I'm not one to listen in on conversations. You must force her to cover my college expenses, Daddy. Emma's voice, which was audible over the speaker, put pressure on her. She's got the cash. Mom claims that she is only being frugal. I thought my husband, David, who had vowed to start a life with me, would correct his daughter instead. I got shivers from his reaction. I'll do my best, my love. Do not be concerned. Jenna will be won over. I know just how to deal with this. The way he spoke about controlling me and the easy assurance in his voice. I became physically unwell as a result. I was unable to remain silent any longer. What precisely should be handled? As I entered the doorway, I inquired. David almost dropped his phone. So, this is your strategy? Conspire behind my back with Emma to coerce me into covering all of the costs. His first astonishment soon gave way to defensiveness. How come you shouldn't? You're rich. You're not a parent yourself. If you so desired, you might be Emma's biological mother. Instead, you're using your money selfishly. I felt his words as if they were actual blows. Being selfish, I didn't want to be coerced and bullied into expecting my spouse to talk to me about important financial issues rather than scheming behind my back. We continued to debate for an additional hour, circling David and failing to recognize any wrongdoing on his part. I finally marched out of his office, my eyes flaming with rage. I declared that I would be spending the night in the guest room. Right now, I can't even look at you. That night, I hardly slept at all. Thoughts of deception and treachery were running through my head. David hardly spoke to me when he left early for work the next morning. When I heard the front door open, I was sitting in my home office, trying desperately to concentrate on my job, but failing horribly. Emma had returned. She was preparing a sandwich for herself in the kitchen when I discovered her, like nothing had occurred. As I faced her, my hands were trembling. Last night, I heard you talking to your father, I said, maintaining a calm tone of voice in spite of my internal turmoil. Could you tell me why you're attempting to coerce your father into putting pressure on me? I was startled by the calculating expression in her eyes when she turned to face me. I thought I knew Dawn, the nice teen. It's not you, she answered icily. I can't be forced to give you explanations. I'm not your mother. Sorry. Trying not to lose my cool, I nodded. However, this is my home, and I am your father's wife. Emma, I deserve basic respect. The next thing she uttered chilled my blood. All right, let's discuss respect, she murmured, folding her arms and putting down her sandwich. I'll give you the respect you deserve and call you Mom. If you cover my tuition and provide me with a monthly stipend of $2,000, that is reasonable, isn't it? The girl in front of me was barely recognizable when I gazed at her. The deception was so deliberate and so obvious. It left me speechless. I let out a chuckle, a bitter, acerbic tone. Are you genuinely attempting to sell me your love? I'm being realistic, she said. Her face was firm. You're wealthy. I'm in need of cash. Do you wish to have a daughter? I need a mother who can adequately support me. It's win-win, Emma. I'm not buying your love. I tried to remain cool, but my voice broke as I spoke. Anger twisted at her face. You're merely an elderly woman without children who will pass away by herself. Mom was correct about you. You are nothing more than a miser who keeps her money for herself rather than for her family. Everything became painfully evident at that instant. Emma had become a manipulative, money-obsessed version of herself as a result of Karen's influence poisoning her psyche. My veins felt like ice as I realized this. My stepdaughter wasn't the only person I had lost. In the first place, I had never truly had her. I was waiting in the living room that night when David got home. My knuckles were white from tension as my hands were clasped tightly in my lap. I had alternated between feeling numb and crying all afternoon, but now I was prepared to face him. We must discuss what transpired with Emma today. As he entered, still untying his tie, I said. His face stiffened instantly. Now what had she done? My gut nodded at the guarded tone in his voice, instantly siding with Emma before even knowing what had transpired. I told Emma about the conversation. She had insulted me cruelly in an attempt to basically sell her love. I was more shocked by his response than by his daughter's actions. Exasperated, he raked his hands through his hair and blew up. I'm so sick of hearing your daily gripes about Emma. It's a novel idea. She is going through a challenging period. She needs encouragement, not unrelenting criticism. I got to my feet, shaky. Assistance? She attempted to coerce me into giving her money. She really attached a cost to calling me mum. $2,000 every month, which includes tuition for college. How are you unable to realize how incorrect that is? You can easily afford the money. His voice rose in response. Emma is only attempting to safeguard her future. You would want to assist if you truly liked us. I felt like I was physically struck by their words. After everything I had done and everything I had tried to be for them, if I truly loved them. Abruptly, I collapsed back onto the couch, tired. David occupied the guest room as I slept through another restless night, this time in my bedroom. As I was lying in the dark, I considered all the moments that had brought this about. I had disregarded every warning sign and let every manipulation. At supper the next evening, I had already decided by morning. I waited until Emma and David had taken their seats. They were smiling and chatting as though nothing had happened, as though none of them had attempted to harm or influence me. I was sickened by how easily they could transition between brutality and normality. I cleared my throat. In regards to college, I have made a decision. I shuddered as Emma and David exchanged victorious glances. They believed they had triumphed. Emma, I'm not going to pay for your college tuition. I made it plain that I didn't want the more costly or less expensive alternatives. Furthermore, I'm not paying you $2,000 a month to act as though you love me. I'm actually not giving you any money at all. The yelling began at once. Emma started crying uncontrollably, letting large, dramatic tears fall down her cheeks. David's chair scraped the floor as he leaped to his feet. Right now, you'll have second thoughts. He loomed over me and demanded, or it's all over between us. A peculiar serenity descended upon me. It was this, the point at when all pretense vanished. I raised my gaze to him and met his irate glance with calm eyes. Thank you for saying that first. Silently, I said. Regarding divorce paperwork, I've already given my lawyer a call. David's face was devoid of color. He took a stumbling step back. I was kidding. Divorce is not what I desire. Let's speak about this, Jenna, honey. I do desire a divorce, though. I interrupted him. Additionally, you won't receive anything from me because of our prenuptial agreement. Tomorrow, I want you both to leave my house. This is not possible. Emma's phony tears became to genuine ones as she screamed. Tell her she can't do this, Daddy. I discreetly slid my chair back and stood up. I am and I can. I advise you both to begin packing. For the first time in months, I heard David's irate yells interspersed with Miss S. frantic sobbing as I made my way upstairs. I was completely unaffected by the sound. Actually, every stride I went away from them made me feel lighter. The following morning was gloomy and chilly. I slept very little and listened to David and Emma packing and moving around the home for the whole of the night. I heard David depart for work at around daybreak, perhaps to begin looking for a new place to reside. My bedroom door was gently knocked on a few hours later. When Emma's voice finally got through, it sounded so beautiful and apologetic that it instantly sent up alarms in my mind. Before responding, I hit the record button on my phone. Please let's chat, Jenna. She was standing in her pink pajamas, appearing fragile and youthful as I answered the door. She was wringing her hands anxiously, and her eyes were crimson with tears. I almost fell for it for a second. As Mother used to do when we first became family, she perched on the side of my bed and whispered, I need to tell you something. Mom came up with it all. Everything. She advised me to demand the funds and costs associated with attending college. If I pressed hard enough, you'd give in, she added. That's what wealthy people always do. I was both fascinated and disgusted by her act. She was competent. The way she looked up at me through her eyelids, the shaky lip, the occasional tear. How many times previously had I been duped by this act? Mom said. She gave a whiff. She said that you would do everything to keep us and that you were most likely lonely and in need of a family. But I feel awful about what I did, and I've been thinking about it all night. She made a move for my hand. I withdrew. I considered it. With an eager edge in her voice, she went on. I also have a fresh idea. I will no longer speak to my mother. I cut her out of my life completely. Whether you'll still cover the cost of college. Is there a college? Not only the costly ones. And instead of $2,000 a month, perhaps just $1,000. That makes sense, doesn't it? She added hurriedly. I really mean at this time I'll be the perfect daughter, which must have conveyed the hatred I felt. I'll assist you with your business. I'll be spending the holidays with you rather than my mother. Everything. In order to physically separate us, I got up to leave the meeting. So you're prepared to forsake your mother in exchange for a lesser price? Emma, can you even hear yourself? In actuality, you're attempting to sell your bond with your own mother. However, I interrupted her. No buts are present. Emma, leave my house. You must depart now with your father. You can't remain here, regardless of where you go. She slammed doors as she passed, running away in sobs. In the afternoon, neither of them said farewell, and they were gone. I discovered little indications of their hurried departure as I strolled about the deserted house. A sock under the bed that was neglected, a half-empty shampoo bottle in the shower. The floor of the dining room still has Emma's college brochure all over it. My phone rang a couple of days later. Karen's phone number? Something forced me to answer when I nearly didn't. Karma's worked, she said, her voice brimming with contentment. It's the end of your marriage. You'll pass away by yourself. Just what I stated. I was aware that you weren't suitable for them. I added pleasantly. I have a surprise for you, Karen. After waiting for her to finish her boasting, I emailed her the audio recording of Emma, threatening to sever her relationship in exchange for cash. Her voice was harsh with worry when she called back right away. It's not real. It was modified by you. Emma would never. She would. She also did. I interrupted her. Karen, you brought her up this way. She learnt to view relationships as transactions from you, to quantify love in monetary terms. You have to deal with the consequences of your parenting now. I wish you pride. Before she could answer, I hung up, blocked her number, and, for the first time in days, poured myself a glass of wine. I grinned. The smile wasn't precisely joyful, but it was genuine. I had freedom. The prenuptial agreement facilitated a speedy divorce. David made no objections. He was unable to. According to mutual acquaintances, Karen and Emma had a major argument after listening to the audio, and she refused to offer any assistance with college. I feel at rest now that I'm sitting in my peaceful home. I've come to like the emptiness I once feared. I have flourishing spores. I've begun to travel more and have rediscovered my true self prior to attempting to fit myself into a prefabricated family. Sarah apologized over the phone for putting me in touch with David. Don't, I informed her. This encounter taught me some important things. What appears flawless on paper can occasionally be everything but in practice. Sarah was silent for a while. What have you heard about them? No, I said candidly, and I don't want to. I've closed that chapter of my life. In retrospect, I can see all the warning signs that I ignored, such Karen's obsession with money. David's slow change from an apparently kind adolescent to a cunning young lady, Emma, and how he never fully confronted his ex-wife or kid. However, I have no regrets about the experience. I learned from it that loneliness is not the same as being alone. My company is still growing. In addition to opening tennis ball stores in nearby cities, I'm looking at franchise prospects. I have a lot of work to do. I adore having people who truly care about me and allowing me to make my own decisions free from financial or emotional coercion. I often think about Emma when working late at one of my spas or while out to dinner with friends, and I hope that she ultimately realizes that respect and love are not something that can be purchased. However, such thoughts are dwindling. I've moved on and am now concentrating on my own achievement and pleasure. Now, when I go around my peaceful home, I no longer experience the same sense of emptiness. Rather, I am thankful for the life I have created and the knowledge to safeguard it. Sometimes the life you truly need isn't the family you believe you desire. I'm stronger because I had to learn that lesson the hard way. Story 3. This is not how I expected my 18th birthday to go, but I suppose I should start at the beginning. Tell you about myself and the events leading up to the day that permanently altered my course in life. I'm Sarah, and I've always thought of myself as my family's second best daughter. Growing up knowing that your mother loves another child more than you is an odd experience. My mother has always loved my half-sister Jessica, who is 10 years older than me. I noticed it in every small detail, such as how Mom would become excited when Jessica phoned, how she would put everything on hold to speak with her, and how she had Jessica's early years pictures on display while my own were hidden away in albums. When will Jessie be visiting Mom? I recall pulling at my mother's sleeve when she was on the phone with Jessica when I was 8 years old. "Sarah, not right now." Waving me away, she would remark, "Your sister's college schedule keeps her quite busy." The answer was always that. Jessica was preoccupied with her life in another state, her profession, and education. However, my mother would frequently visit her, leaving me with my father, who did his best to compensate for my mother's emotional absence. Mom would always excuse herself from whatever we were doing when Jessica phoned, even if we were watching a movie or having supper. She once even left my school play in the middle of it because Jessica had phoned with some really vital information. Jessica's purchase of a new vehicle. Our family's history is complex. My mom had a previous marriage, got married to my father after divorcing, and had Jessica. Jessica was 11 years old when I was born. She lived with us, although I hardly remember it. She never actually returned home after leaving for college when I was 8 years old. However, the change in our mother's treatment of us was evident even over those 8 years. While I received hand-me-downs, Jessica received new clothing. Jessica had parties to celebrate her accomplishments, while I only received a nice job. If I was fortunate, my dad was my pillar of support, the one individual who genuinely made me feel desired and cherished. He would always find time for me, listen to me when I wanted to chat, help with my schoolwork, and attend my school functions. Then everything changed 3 years ago. The final thing standing between me and my mother's icy indifference was his sudden death. She had a significant transformation. She used to infrequently show me love. She grew aloof when Dad passed away, occasionally going days without talking to me. I'm grateful for my granddad, the father of my dad. He became my main source of support after my father passed away. He's the sort of grandfather who always has a warm grin waiting for me, remembers all the significant dates, and attends all the school functions. He would make sure I wasn't alone when Mom would travel to see Jessica, sometimes for weeks at a time. My 18th birthday was drawing near. I chose to keep things straightforward. Just a family get-together at our house, no extravagant events or crazy parties. I still wanted to make an effort to reunite our broken family in spite of everything. I foolishly believed that reaching 18 would finally convince my mother that I was an adult deserving of her attention. I planned everything for a week. I was determined to show that I could manage the party like an adult. Because my grandfather had given me $1, to do so. I ordered a gorgeous cake, decorated the home, and purchased all the food myself. In the hopes that it would please Mom, I made sure to purchase all of her favorite meals. I even gave Jessica a call in the hopes that she would wish to attend this significant life event. When she picked up, I tried to steady my son and said, "Hey Jess, next weekend I'm hosting a modest birthday celebration. Do you want to attend?" "Oh, Sarah," she said in a chilly, aloof voice. "I have my own affairs to attend to. Can't make it." Apologies, click. Before I could reply, she hung up. I felt that familiar pang in my chest as I stood there with my phone. What had I ever done to earn her such a strong disdain for me? I was the kid of my mother's second marriage, was that all? Or was there anything inherently flawed about me? However, breakfast the next morning dealt the big punch. As I was reviewing my party checklist one final time to make sure everything would be flawless, Mom entered the kitchen. As she poured her coffee, Sarah continued, "I need to tell you something," without even glancing at me. "Tomorrow I will not attend your party. Jessica is hosting a housewarming party tomorrow at her newly purchased flat. I'm going to assist her in getting ready tonight. For a minute, the world appeared to pause. It's my 18th birthday, Mom, I said, hardly raising my voice above a whisper. I mean, the housewarming can wait. At last, she gave me a chilly glance. I've already determined that I care more about Jessica's housewarming. I care more about her. You are mature enough to comprehend it. I felt the remarks as if they were actual blows. In my heart, I'd always known that Mom loved Jessica more, but listening to her express it so directly, tears were flowing down my cheeks as I rushed to my room, leaving my breakfast on the kitchen table. As if she hadn't just broken my heart, I could hear her singing happily as she packed her luggage in the adjacent room as I was crying. I tried one final time, desperately, through my tears. I gave Jessica another call in the hopes that she might assist me and that perhaps, just possibly, she felt a bit like a sister to me. Please, Jessica. I tried not to crack my voice when I spoke into the phone. Is it not possible to reschedule your housewarming event? I'm 18 years old today. Sorry, sis, she said, her voice entirely without pity. Only tomorrow will my boyfriend be able to attend. The next day, he is departing on a business trip. I inhaled deeply and tightened my hold on the phone. At the very least, could you beg Mom to stay? Your housewarming is more important to her than my birthday. Do you not believe that to be incorrect? On the opposite end of the queue, there was a little chuckle. Look, Sarah, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't do that. And I'd like not to. I've always been loved more by Mom than you. That's the way things are. You must come to terms with it and go on. Give up attempting to alter unchangeable circumstances. The dial tone and my dashed expectations were all that remained after she hung up. I listened to my mother humming cheerfully as she packed her bag downstairs as I sat on my bed, feeling them. My heart ached when I heard how happy she was to be leaving me. Then she shouted out to Sarah, "Now I'm heading to the station. You've grown up. The party may be managed by you. For a week, I will be away." Before I could reply from the window of my bedroom, the front door banged. I didn't even look back at the home as I saw her get into a cab. She was most likely messaging Jessica while looking at her phone. She was grinning as the cab sped off. And suddenly I was by myself. I sat in our empty house, surrounded by the decorations, on that final night of my youth. I endured such optimism. The birthday cake that I had ordered was sitting in the refrigerator. On the kitchen counter, snacks were prepared for the next day. The air conditioning caused the balloons I had inflated to softly bob, creating odd shadows on the walls. Everything appeared to be flawless, but it wasn't. The two individuals who ought to have been the most concerned about my birthday had decided to be elsewhere. It seemed as though nature was making fun of my emotions as the morning of my birthday broke. I forced myself to put on a brave front by getting up early to finish the party preparations. I made a final check of the food, rearranged the decorations, and attempted to practice smiling in front of the mirror. I wanted to hide my hardness from my guests. Visitors began to arrive about midday. My parents, Dad's family, Aunt Clara, my sister with my cousins, and my grandfather. "Happy birthday, my love." And Clara gave me a firm hug, as her well-known scent brought back fond memories of happier family get-togethers. Then she took a glance around. Her smile wavered. "Where is your mum?" My forced grin threatened to break as I swallowed hard. She traveled to another state to attend Jessica's housewarming celebration. There was silence in the room. I witnessed my cousins exchanging startled glances, as Aunt Clara's jaw dropped wide. The tension in the air suddenly increased. She left. With obvious shock, my aunt inquired. I could feel her hands tightening with astonishment from yesterday, even though they were still on my shoulders. Fighting back tears, I managed to respond that Jessica's housewarming was more essential. For a week, she will be away. Something I had never seen before flashed in Grandfather's eyes as his face darkened. Anger and resolve mixed together. I could sense his tension and rage as he drew me into a tight hug. "Well," he exclaimed forcefully, breaking the awkward stillness with his voice, "I believe it's time for me to announce something." Grandfather cleared his throat after everyone had taken their seats in the living room. His silver hair gleamed in the afternoon sunlight that poured through the windows. "I want to start by expressing my pride in Sarah. As her father would have wished, she was awarded a full scholarship to college. As everyone cheered, he took a moment before continuing. That's not my major announcement, though. I own this house, as you are all aware. Like everyone else, I nodded. Everyone knew this. Even before Dad passed away, Grandfather had allowed us to reside here for many years. His kindness had always been appreciated by me. Today, he said, his voice clear and firm, I would like to make my will decision public. He took an envelope out of his jacket, its paper appearing professional and clean. This house is yours today, Sarah. There was utter silence in the room. A pin may have been dropped. I gazed at him. Yes, I had misheard. My chest is thumping with my heart. What? I've finished all the paperwork already. It's your 18th birthday today. This house legally belongs to you. He gave the envelope to me. His eyes were sparkling, his hand steady. And that's not all. However, I hope it won't be many years until I die away. My whole estate, including my home, will pass to you. Additionally, $500,000. Stunned, I sat there with the envelope shaking in my hands. Applause and congratulations exploded around the room, but it all seemed far away and surreal. I felt as though I was witnessing it happen to another person. With trembling fingers, I opened the mail to see my name on the deed to our home. It is official and indisputable due to the legal wording, Grandfather. With tears in my eyes, I whispered, Are you certain that this is? This is excessive. Warm and comforting. He grasped my hand in his. Sarah, you are my only grandchild. This is something you deserve. It was you who stayed. Who has demonstrated genuine family values? I am fully aware of my actions. The lady you end up becoming would make your father proud. The gathering evolved into a festivity. For the first time that day, I was surprised. As my family congratulated me and told me about my father, I shed happy tears rather than sad ones. For the first time in a long time, I felt anything. I had a sense of belonging. My mind was still reeling from yesterday's events when I got up early the next morning. It was still adorned from the party. The home was silent, and now, astonishingly, it was mine. I touched the walls as I moved around the rooms, seeing everything in a fresh way. The pictures of the family on the walls. The cozy location where Dad used to relax in his favorite chair on the carpet. Each year, he measured my height and left a little mark on the kitchen door frame. The house where I grew up was no longer the only one. It was my home. I was brewing coffee, inhaling the well-known morning aroma that brought back memories of quiet meals with my father. My phone rang. When I realized it was my mother phoning, my heart skipped a beat. She didn't even hold off on greeting me. Is it true, Sarah? What? Clara also informed me of Grandpa's will and his gift. Her speech was frantic and breathless. No birthday greetings. I don't regret skipping my celebration. Directly to the inheritance. Her voice had a barely restrained enthusiasm that I could perceive. As I watched the steam rise from the black liquid, I tightened my hold on my coffee mug. Indeed, it's accurate. But why are you phoning your mother? You were meant to spend a week with Jessica, right? Her housewarming celebration was more significant, wasn't it? She chuckled. The sound was so high-pitched that it made my skin crawl. Oh, my love. You've been on my mind constantly. I regret not being there on your birthday. Today, I'm returning home. My ticket has already been purchased. We have a lot to discuss. I was startled at how firm my voice was when I added, Don't rush back on my account. After all, you ought to remain with your favorite daughter. I heard you say that. I understood Sarah because I was old enough. She sounded surprised. Don't utter such things. Both of my girls are equally loved by me. You're simply being overly sensitive. The speed with which she had forgotten what she had said only 2 days prior nearly made me chuckle. Really? Because when you went for her housewarming celebration, you actually informed me that Jessica was more important to you. Where have you already forgotten that exchange? She argued, using the wheedling tone she employed to get what she wanted. You're twisting my words. We can discuss everything, including your amazing fortune, when I get home this evening. For our family, this is such a wonderful moment. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table, watching the early sun create shadows through the window as my coffee cooled. I understood why she was actually returning. The future inheritance, the house. All at once, I was worthy of attention. All of a sudden, she interrupted her priceless meeting with Jessica because I was important enough. Just as planned, a text message from Jessica buzzed through my phone. Hello, sister. I hope your birthday was wonderful. I sent a lovely present to you by courier. It should come shortly. I miss you. I read the message repeatedly while I gaped at it in shock. Jessica had never sent me a birthday present in my 18 years. It was the first time she had ever wished me a happy birthday. Until the abrupt shift in both of them was so evident, it was painfully clear that she had heard about the inheritance. If it hadn't been so painful, it would have been comical. Mom. That night, with a broad smile and outstretched arms, they burst through the door. "Sarah, darling," she said, embracing me firmly as her high-end scent overpowered my senses. "Cheers to your birthday." I apologize for missing your celebration, but I just can't express how pleased I am of you. All grown up and so accomplished, my little child, 18 years old and a homeowner. Imagine. I stood still in her arms, recalling how, only 2 days before, she had departed without giving me a second look. With a smile on her face, she withdrew and began to compliment me on my maturity, academic success, and pride in my full scholarship. Every word sounded deliberate and prepared, as though she had practiced them during the train ride home. With the attitude of someone who felt they were being really clever, she said, "I'll make your favorite dinner tonight," and went to the kitchen to commemorate both your inheritance and your birthday. My first thought is chicken parmesan. That right there is still your favorite. It was the true reason she had come back, and she had made a mistake. I didn't like chicken parmesan, but Jessica did. Dad's lasagna recipe was my favorite. Something that, had she ever listened, Mom would have known. "Isn't it a little late to celebrate someone's birthday?" As I followed her into the kitchen, I inquired. "When you left, you made it apparent what your priorities were. Remember, Jessica is more important." With a forced smile, she retrieved pots and pans from the cupboards and said, "Oh, sweetheart, don't be like that. I love you, you know that. Your sister needed help with her housewarming, so I had to help. I was necessary to her. I didn't, but you know how she feels about these things. Mom, it was my 18th birthday, an event of a lifetime." She dismissively waved her hand without looking at me. "Compared to Jessica at your age, you are more mature. I had faith in your ability to manage." With a sly smile, she said after pausing, "Besides, you're a very self-sufficient woman now that you own the house. We ought to rejoice about that as well. I was ill. So that's the actual reason you're back? Since the house is now mine. Sarah." She put a theatrical palm to her breast, seeming insulted. "What gives you the impression that I'm back? Since I cherish you. I don't care about the house at all. My daughter is you." However, I was no longer able to believe her. I went to bed early that night, but I had trouble falling asleep. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened over the last few days. I heard my mother's voice coming from the living room when I got up to fetch some water at around midnight. Clearly believing I was asleep, she was on the phone. "Pay attention, Jessica." Her voice was clear yet low as she spoke. "Now we must treat Sarah with extreme kindness. She left her all that money, and she owns the home and the old idiots. Yes, I am aware that this sum of money is substantial, but we must exercise caution." My hand was clutching the wall for support as I paused in the corridor, my heart racing. "Yes, I am aware of it." Unaware that she had an audience, Mom went on. "She needs to trust us once more. Now you have to be the ideal big sister. Give her presents. Give her a call on a regular basis. You're skilled at playing it. We can start working on collecting the money from her once she has faith in us. Perhaps persuade her to fund your venture. She is sufficiently gullible to fall for it." I purposely made the floorboards squeak as I entered the doorway. When Mom spotted me standing there, she turned around, her face turning pale. The phone fell from her grasp and landed on the couch. "Sarah?" With a gasp, she abruptly ended the conversation. What you heard was misinterpreted by you. I was fair. Did I?" I spoke in a chilly tone. "I believe I fully understood. Your undesired daughter has finally found a purpose thanks to you and Jessica." I didn't wait for my mother to come up with further justifications. Even though my hands were shaking from a mix of hurt and rage, I walked straight to the phone and dialed my grandfather. Despite the late hour, he stated he would be right over when he answered on the second ring. As we talked, I could hear him already grabbing his keys. "Please, Sarah." I waited as Mom followed me around the house. When she desired anything, Her voice took on the deceptive tone I had seen her employ so often. "You're misinterpreting this. All I wanted to do was assist Jessica with her company. As a family, we ought to help one another. Why are you acting so obstinately?" For the first time, I truly saw her when I turned to face her. The measured worry in her eyes, the way she prepared herself to change course at any time. "Family. Do you call this that? Trying to take advantage of me for financial gain? Attempting to deceive me into giving away my fortune by calling my grandfather an old idiot." She abruptly changed her tone from appealing to annoyed, saying, "You're being dramatic. I've always found it simpler with Jessica for just this reason. She is aware of the dynamics of family. She is aware that we occasionally need to provide financial support to one another. Now you're behaving like a kid. She knows how you operate," I retaliated, finally releasing years of repressed rage. "Both of you do. Hasn't the focus always been on what you can obtain from others? You married Dad for that reason? As he was wealthy. You stayed after he passed away for that reason? Due to this home. Did you ever genuinely love one of us at any point?" Mom became furious and her cheeks flushed. "You dare?" She was interrupted by the doorbell, so I hurried to allow Grandfather in. After glancing at my face, he realized something wasn't right. As they walked by me to Mom, his eyes hardened, and like a switch flip, his face quickly turned from me to one of compassion and sweetness. She began, Dad, but her grandfather interrupted her with a raised hand. His voice was harsh and stern as he replied, "I heard everything from Sarah on the phone. I've been aware of your personality for years. After my son passed away, I allowed you to remain in this house, Margaret, just for Sarah's benefit. I hoped you would take over and be a true mother to her at last." I watched as my mother's masks came off and her face changed. One by one, she realized she was losing control of the situation and turned her gaze from me to her granddad. It was amazing to see the change, as if a stranger had appeared behind a familiar face. She spit at her grandfather, saying, "You're an old fool." Her actual nature is finally becoming fully apparent. "You believe that your present to Sarah and your will are quite intelligent. She's only a kid. That type of money is beyond her capabilities. Her family must provide her with direction. You'll never be as responsible or mature as she is." Grandfather put his arm around my shoulders and answered quietly, "Additionally, Sarah is now the home's owner. You must make a choice. Even if they are members of their family, you don't have to allow them to remain in your life." I gave my mother a lot of attention. She was already attempting to determine how to take advantage of this circumstance, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. I reflected on all the years Mom had made me feel inferior, the anniversaries she had skipped, and the times she had picked Jessica over me. I pondered her departure for Jessica's housewarming celebration, her harsh remarks, and her scheme to exploit me with Jessica. "I want you to go." Silently but forcefully, I said, "You no longer call this place home. Actually, it was never. For 2 days, Mom didn't go peacefully." She yelled at me, calling me harsh, greedy, and ungrateful. She mentioned all the sacrifices she said she had made for me. She has endured every second of raising me. In an attempt to ruin my life, she vowed to challenge my grandfather's will and file a lawsuit for her rights as a renter. She experimented with phony tears, remorse, wrath, and threats. Ultimately, though, she was powerless. Officially and legally, the house belonged to me, therefore she had to leave. According to family, she relocated to Jessica's state after she departed. Over the following few months, they made several attempts to contact me via phone and text. There were always kind remarks about how much they missed me and how the family was getting back together. Every message was deliberately written to make me feel bad and to make me second-guess my choice. However, I banned their phone numbers. Certain poisonous relationships are better left in the past, and certain bridges that have been burnt should remain that way. My grandfather assisted me in acclimating to my new home. He gave me advice on home care, property taxes, and all the other duties that come with being a homeowner. That autumn, I enrolled in college. Although I still reside in my home, I also spend a lot of time at my grandfather's house. He taught me how to handle money and property at our weekly Sunday dinners. More significantly, he taught me the true meaning of unconditional love. Your dad would be very pleased with you. One evening, while we sat on his porch and watched the sunset paint the sky in dazzling hues, he informed me, "Sarah, you don't realize how powerful you are. When it counted most, you defended yourself." In a few of months, I reflected on all that had transpired since my 18th birthday. Everything in my universe had altered. In a sense, I had never truly had a mother or sister in the first place, but I had lost them. I did have a grandfather who loved me without conditions, though. A house of my own and the autonomy to create my life as I see fit. I knew the truth. Despite the pain, they had the fortitude to confront it. "Grandpa, you know what?" As we watched the last of the sunshine disappear, I replied, holding his hand tightly. "Dad would probably be pleased with us both. What he would have desired, you did. In addition to the inheritance, you shielded me by enlightening me. You may not always finish up with the family you were born into. And that's all right. To create place for the proper individuals, it's sometimes necessary to let go of the incorrect ones." I knew I would be okay as my grandfather and I sat there and watched the sky change from pink and gold to deep purple. For the first time, I could be myself without attempting to get affection from people who couldn't give it to me.